Welcome to a new pattern tutorial video. Today I want to show you how you can make one of these awesome card holders. The pattern includes two versions. So there's one with a coin compartment, where you can also have a few extra cards behind the coin compartment. Or if you don't need the coins, you can also do the same version with a few extra card holders. Both of them are included in the pattern. And the wallet also has a space for these awesome card holders where you can fit up to 10 cards. And with this version you can also stash a few extra cards behind here. You have your bill compartment and all that in a classic slim form factor. So if you want to see how it's made, stay tuned. For the build today I have two versions here, one in brown, one in green, where the brown one is the one with the extra coin compartment and the green one is the one with extra card holders. And the build is almost the same for both of them, but I want to show you both variations. And for this build you will also need two sizes of leather. And here for the outside shell I have 1.6mm leather, and for the inside you want to use around 1.2 or up to 1.4mm. If you don't have the thicker leather available, you can also use the thinner one for the outside, but it works better if you have a sturdier leather for the outside. Then, to get started, I will first work with the card version, so the green one. And as always, we will first need to bevel and burnish quite a few things. And the pieces that we want to bevel and burnish are the top side of the outer shell, the top side of the inner side. Then for the card holder, we want to bevel and burnish all the way around the outside except for the left side. And of course also the top of both of the card slots. So let's get that done first. Okay, now with all the parts beveled and burnished, we can take our card holder cover, and I will prefer to glue this to the shell part first and then punch and stitch it. But you can also just punch both pieces first and then just sew them together. So I just spread some white glue on the edge of the cover. And then we glue this to the shell piece, and we want to make sure we align the top parts of both pieces. Just press this down. Then, once our piece is dry, we just take our wing divider, mark our stitch line, and start punching the holes. Then, once we have the two pieces glued together, we want to fix the other sides to the shell. And for that I will take my skiving knife again, and we want to scratch the pieces we will be gluing here, because then the contact cement will have better hold. So I just go a few millimeters over these edges and rough up the surface so our glue will stick properly. Then we do the same at the bottom, but here you want to make sure that you scratch from this corner, because this will form this pocket later on. Let me show you that. So the piece will sit here on the corner. So we want to scratch from there until this end. And that will then also already give us the markings where we need to put our glue. So I just take some contact cement, go over these edges. And then we repeat the same for this pocket. So once over the bottom, once on the side. Then we can take our piece and we want to start on this side, aligning it on the top corner, and then pressing down all the way. And then for this one again, we press it up into the corner, start there, and then work our way to the opposite side. Now you can also already see how this will form the pocket for the card holder, and we will also have the slot here at the bottom where you then will have the lever to open up your cards. So for now we'll continue on the other side and actually start with the card slots. And what we want to do now is, once again, you can take these measurements from the sewing pattern, but I want to show you a little bit more in depth how you can construct these markings for yourself without always relying on the pattern itself. And one more step that is optional but helps a lot to make your wallet fall more flat is that for the inner card pocket we can also skive off a little bit of the ends and the edges to thin it out a little bit so it will sit more flush later on. And for that I just use my French skiver, but you can also do it just by sandpaper or a normal skiving knife. So to create the correct markings, just put both pieces on the shell and position them right where they will be later on. And then I can take away again the outer card piece and just create small markings around the tabs and also maybe the bottom. So then now when we take it away, we know that we want to glue this in this position so that we will not have any gaps between the cards later on. And then we can start by attaching the inner card slot first. So I'll just put some contact cement on the edges. And then we can glue the first card slot. And now we want to punch and stitch these holes to attach the inner card slot to the shell. Then we can go on to connect the outer card slot, and for that we will just spread glue on 3 sides. So make sure that the one side where you don't spread glue is the one edge that you also already beveled and burnished. And once dry, then we can just attach the outer card slot right beneath the inner card slot. And in my case I also have a little bit left over from the inner card slot because I usually cut them a little bit longer. So then we can just turn it around and then cut off the excess. And now of course we still need to actually stitch and sew the card holders to the shell. But for this one it's important that for now we only want to stitch the top side. And that is because later when we attach the other piece of the shell, then we don't want to sew these two together so we still have our bill compartment. So this means we can just mark the top stitch line. So I just take my wing divider, mark the stitch line, and then we can punch our stitch line. And just one more tip or guidance, for this stitching hole you want to make sure that you have one punch that sits right above the card holder, so the punch only goes through the shell, and you also have one of the teeth right between the 2 card holders, because this way you can really make sure that once it's stitched together these parts will not fray. So here you should be able to see that here I have a punch right between the card holders and one punch that sits right on top of the card holders. Okay, let's go and stitch this together. Now with these sides of the card holders attached, we can also bevel and burnish the top side. And then I will go and continue to also show you how you can make the coin compartment if you choose to do the other version. Now I switched over to the brown version, where this is the one with the extra coin compartment. And for this we will first want to punch the holes for our button. And then we can just add our button to these holes. Then once we have our button attached to both of the sides, we can glue together the pouch, and for that we will glue them together this way so that the bevel and burnished side will be facing the top. before we attach the pocket to our main body, we will want to cut off the trim allowance on the top side. So on these things, you should see that there is this 1 or 2 millimeter cut off, and you can use this as an indicator also for the trim allowance. So we'll just position the piece and then cut off the trim allowance. And from here we can, as always, just mark our stitch line with the wing divider. And start punching our holes. And for this one, there should also be the first tooth should go right above this piece so that you can secure them nice and tight, so that even if you open the pocket with more force, you have one stitch that is holding it in place so that this edge doesn't fray later on. And then we can stitch this side together. After the piece is stitched, we can then also bevel and burnish the top side. And now we already have our coin compartment. And similar to the card version, we will not be stitching the rest of the coin pocket now, because we will attach it now to the main body and then we will stitch it later once everything is assembled. But again, here for gluing these two pieces together, because we have the grain sides facing each other, I will be roughing up the edges. Then for the assembly, I like to start here in the top corner, line them up, and then start working my way downwards. And these edges also don't have to be perfect, because also here we will be taking off the trim allowance later, so you get some nice clean edges, which also makes finishing them much easier. Now, to attach the outer shell to our main body, we will want to put them together on the edges first, because you will notice that the outer shell is a little bit larger. And this is because once the wallet wraps around, we want them to be nice and even. And for that, we will start gluing them on the outside and then work our way inwards. We once again start in the top corner to align both of our pieces and work our way downwards. And then repeat the same for the other side. And then from there, we can start working our way inwards from both sides. Now with that assembled, the only piece missing is that we actually need to sew those pieces together. And here you have basically two choices. You can either sew everything first and then cut off the trim allowance, or you can cut off the trim allowance first and then stitch everything together. Personally, for this one, I like to do the stitching first and then cut off the trim allowance. And I will also tell you the main reason for this, because I'm doing these wallets with 4mm diamond irons. And for the diamond irons, what I notice is that if you punch the holes, they will spread the leather outwards, so that if you've already cut off the trim allowance, you will have small hills on the edges, which will be noticed later, and you will need to do more sanding. If you use French pricking irons, then it doesn't really matter. Then you can also cut off the trim allowance first and then stitch it. But this is just something that I've noticed over the years, and maybe this might also be helpful to you. So with that out of the way, then let's mark our stitch line, where we will also need to recall, because we need to factor in the trim allowance. I'm not going to use my normal 3mm, but instead set it to 5, so that we can later on still take off the 2mm trim allowance. And here in this case, then you can already see from the pattern that if I mark now my 5mm stitch line, I should end up right in the punch that I did previously for the coin pocket. So I just mark my stitch line all the way around. And then we can start punching the whole outline as well. All of our wallets stitched together, we can actually start taking off our trim allowance on the edges. And for that, the easy part is first to do the sides. So I can just align my ruler. And I've also put in a new blade in my knife, because you really want to make sure it's as sharp as possible for this step. Once everything is lined, we can just take our knife. And I also recommend to look on the cut from the top down, so that you can always make sure that you have your blade in a right angle to your table, because otherwise your cut will not be a straight edge, and you might also cut into your threads. So you really want to be careful with this one. You can see that you get a very nice, sharp and clean edge. And now for the bottom, it gets a little bit tricky, but the way that I do it is I put one side flat on the table, put my ruler in place, and then cut as far as I can on that side. And then for the other side, I cut this freehand, but if you have a slim ruler, you can also put it, or you just need a bit of more force and put your ruler on top here. And then lastly, I take my knife and insert it into the cut, and then just cut along the bottom till we reach the other side of our cut. And then this piece comes off clean as well. And now the only thing missing is we actually need to finish our edges. And then to finish the edges of our wallet, the process that I use for these is, because we already have a nice solid starting edge, so we don't need to start all the way from scratch. And what I do is to go over them with Tokenol once, leave that to dry a little bit. Then we use 600 grit sandpaper, then we sand it once dry, then I put on Tokenol, and then I again use the 600 grit sandpaper to sand it wet. And once that is done, then I actually bevel the edges and then go over the whole thing with Tokenol once more, and then we actually polish it. So let's do that part as well, and then I will show you the results. And now, with your edges all done, you're basically done. The only part missing is to insert your card holder. Just put it in the pocket, and it might be a bit stiff at the first try, but you also really want this to have a good fit. And once that is in there, you're all good to go. So I hope you enjoyed the pattern. If you do, please leave a like. And if you want to see more patterns in the future, also consider subscribing. And with that, I would say, see you in the next one.